Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the synthesis of yoga with our beloved Ranga. We are on page, what is it, 79? 79, the higher mind, the last paragraph.
The higher mind in man is something other, loftier, purer, vaster, more powerful than the reason or logical intelligence. The animal is a vital and sensational being. Man, it is said, is distinguished from the animal by the possession of reason. But that is a very summary, a very imperfect and misleading account of the matter. For reason is only a particular and limited utilitarian and instrumental activity that proceeds from something much greater than itself, from a power that dwells in an ether more luminous, wider, illimitable. The true and ultimate, as distinguished from the immediate or intermediate importance of our observing, reasoning, enquiring, judging intelligence, is that it prepares the human being for the right reception and right action of a light from above, which must progressively replace in him the obscure light from below that guides the animal. The latter also has a rudimentary reason, a kind of thought, a soul, a will, and keen emotions. Even though less developed, its psychology is yet the same in kind as man's. But all these capacities in the animal are automatically moved and strictly limited, almost even constituted by the lower nervous being. All animal perceptions, sensibilities, activities are ruled by nervous and vital instincts, cravings, needs, satisfactions, of which the nexus is the life impulse and vital desire. Man too is bound, but less bound to this automatism of the vital nature. Man can bring an enlightened will, an enlightened thought, and enlightened emotions to the difficult work of his self development. He can more and more subject to these more conscious and reflecting guides the inferior function of desire. In proportion as he can thus master and enlighten his lower self, he is man and no longer an animal. When he can begin to replace desire altogether by a still greater enlightened thought and sight and will, in touch with the infinite, consciously subject to a diviner will than his own, linked to a more universal and transcendent knowledge, he has commenced the ascent towards the Superman. He is on his upward march towards the divine. So, he is now he is describing also a bit of the level 1, and he is going to level 2 of the spiritual planes of consciousness, of which the higher mind is the first layer above the normal logical reason. So, when he speaks of the higher, we'll read each sentence now. When he speaks of the higher mind, it's a technical term he is using in his terminology. The higher mind is not a mind which is higher, no. It's a very specific plane of consciousness. It's the first plane of consciousness of level 2. In level, I like to speak of level 1, level 2 because it gives clarity. Level 1 is our normal consciousness, where we are identified with our body, our life, and our mind. And we are thinking that the physical world is real. We take the appearances and the forms of things to be real, and that is ignorance. because we don't see the oneness of things. That's level 1. But if by any way you can silence your mind or experience the self, which is the level 2, the higher mind is the first plane you encounter in that level, the spiritual planes of consciousness. Higher mind is the first one. He may discuss elsewhere. The second level is the illumined mind. The third is the intuitive mind, and the fourth is the overmind. Above that, you can say you are entering level 3, which is supermind. So, the higher mind, one should not mistake it for, the higher is not an adjective here. It's an adjective, but higher mind is a nomenclature for a particular plane of consciousness in the spiritual planes of consciousness. The higher mind in man, he is now describing what it is something other, loftier, purer, vaster, more powerful than the reason or logical intelligence. He is making a small difference between reason and logical intelligence. Because some sort of reason is there in the animals also, he will tell you. And we will give examples of that. And logical reason is the capacity to think logically in a sequence of many, many steps. The animal can't do that, but it can surprisingly do that sometimes to a very large extent. That also we will discuss. Okay, so the animal is a vital and sensational being. Vital and sensational. Sensation, the physical result of the impact coming from outside, it's a sensation. A sensation of hunger, a sensation of pain, a sensation of pleasure. Okay, so all these are sensations. So the animal is mostly limited to its sensations. Man, it is said, is distinguished from the animal by the possession of reason. Now Srimad is explaining that this has to be clarified, and more, one has to go more into detail. But that's a very summary, a very imperfect and misleading account of the matter. For, he is explaining why. For, reason is only a particular and limited utilitarian and instrumental activity that proceeds from something much greater than itself. So, reason is, he is using the word utilitarian, it's useful in our life for living your physical life reasonably well. You have to use reason. If there is a choice, you have to decide by reason which one is to be done. So it's very useful and utilitarian, very limited use of the mind. And instrumental activity. Reason is an instrument which man can use for his daily life that proceeds from something much greater than itself. So reason, the origin of reason is coming from the higher planes of consciousness, from a power that dwells in an ether, more luminous, wider, illimitable. So let's look at the word ether. Ether is one of the subtlest state of existence or substance. There is a substance, right, starting from the lowest level of matter. There is something even more dense. The inconscient is even denser than matter. And there seems to be almost nothing. Matter, there is still energy. And matter can be molded by life into forms. It can create trees, it can create plants, and beautiful plants, flowers, animals. But the inconscient seems to be absolutely devoid of all life and all consciousness. The inconscient. Then you have matter, then you have life, etc. Okay, so this is so reason is something that is coming from the spiritual planes of consciousness, and even the animal has got a bit of reason, used mainly for practical purposes in life, not logical thinking, intelligence. He has used the word logical intelligence, where you can think in a very, very sequential manner and come to conclusions which are fairly dependable. So, the animal, he has told you, is vital and sensational. And man is supposed to have reason, but Srimati is saying that that's not a very good way of describing. It's much more detailed than that. And he's explaining why. For reason is only a particular and limited utilitarian and instrumental activity that proceeds from something much greater than itself, which is the spiritual planes of consciousness, from a power that dwells in an ether more luminous, wider, and illimitable. So this ether, which is more luminous, wider, and illimitable, is the higher mind. He started with that. The higher mind and illumined mind also. Okay?
But the ether is situated where?
Which one?
The ether.
Oh, the ether is at the highest level.
So
the highest, subtlest substance is ether. So there is a way of describing that. Slightly below ether, okay, is air. You can start sensing it. You can feel the air. Because it is slightly more gross than ether. Ether, no senses can access ether. No sense. But air is slightly more dense and the skin can access it. Now the eyes can't, the ears can't, the nose can't, neither can the tongue. But only the skin can feel the air. Okay? Then you come down to water, which is even more dense. Then when you come to water, it's there's fire. There's fire. And these are not fire and water. These are representative figures to describe the relative density of this substance. Okay? So fire, you can use your eyes to see it. But you can't use your tongue and nor your nose. Okay? Then you come down to water, that becomes taste. You can taste. The sense of taste can access the substance which is described as water. Then you come to earth, and then the question of smell comes in. As you keep going up, one by one, the senses start getting eliminated. In earth, all the senses are operable. They all are operating. You can see matter, you can taste matter, you can hear matter also. Even earthquake is there, you can hear it, you can touch it. Okay? So ether is the subtlest of substance at the highest level. So we continue with the sentence. So the true and ultimate, as distinguished from the immediate or intermediate importance of our observing, reasoning, inquiring, judging intelligence, is that it prepares the human being for the right reception and right action of a light from above, which must progressively replace in him the obscure light from below that guides the animal. So, very interesting words he has used. Let's look at some of them. The true and ultimate reason, okay? True and ultimate, as distinguished from the immediate and intermediate importance. So it can be immediate, means at the lowest level, or intermediate, slightly higher importance in our observing. The animal also observes. We also observe. Reasoning, inquiring. Srimad often uses the word inquire. Both are allowed. En and in. He uses in. Inquiring. The meaning is the same. Judging intelligence. Okay. Now, judging intelligence is that it prepares the human being for the right reception and right action of a light from above, which must progressively replace in him the obscure light from below that guides the animal. Here, Srimad is very fond of using oxymorons. Here you have an obscure light, which is an oxymoron. What he means is very clear what he means, but he puts it in a dramatic way. So, light is never obscure, but that means it is a semi-light. It's a semi-darkness and a semi-light. That's what he means. From below, as it keeps on coming, consciousness grows, light grows, power grows. So, the reason is something quite low. It has to be replaced by the higher mind, which is more luminous, wider, illimitable. In another place, he has described our normal mind as a candlelit room. We have to struggle to see things. We have to think out. Sometimes we don't know what to conclude. So the mind is a candlelit room. But when you go to the higher mind, it becomes like a broad daylight. That's the difference. You don't have to struggle anymore there.
Yeats often uses the half-light. He speaks of the half-light.
Yeah. It's relative. Everything, at one level it is half light, and if you go higher up, it's more full than the lower
Yes.
one. It goes on until finally you have the full light only in the supermind. Even the spiritual planes of consciousness, the light is intense, but it is still limited in relation to the other, to the higher. Okay, so light from above, which must progressively replace in him the obscure light from below that guides the animal. The latter is also, has also a rudimentary reason. He's talking of the animal, a kind of thought, a soul, a will, and keen emotions. So, rudimentary reason. Now that's interesting because sometimes birds do use a action and they use thought as an instrument in a very fundamental manner. Okay? For instance, cranes with long legs, they stand in the water and they have to catch fish. So what they do is they take a dry leaf and throw it on the water with their beak. And when the ripples come, the fish think that the fish get the impression that there is an insect which has fallen. They come up. And immediately the crane grabs it. So there is logic there. Some sort of reason, very fundamental reason, only one step. But there are certain animals which can understand much more. Okay, chimpanzees, dolphins, and even elephants have memories. They have all sorts of. There are crows which are very intelligent, and they are capable even of logic in 3 or 4 steps. Sometimes they do that. For instance, the chimpanzee, when it wants to, it loves white ants. So it takes a long straw or a long stick and pokes it into the ant hill and then brings it out and eats. So it is using an instrument. Monkeys also, when they have to break nuts, they use stones. So there is a process of thinking that if I do this, I'll be able to do this.
Although rudimentary.
Rudimentary, exactly. Just one step. Reason very, very limited. When eagles catch big prey, okay, sometimes they need to kill the prey and they can't do it only with their beak and claws. So what they do, they fly high and drop it. And then when it falls, it dies. Then it tears it apart. So there is a logic, minimum amount of logic in animals. Okay, so rudimentary reason Srimad is calling it, a kind of thought, a soul. Now the word soul, we have to be careful. The soul is not the psychic being in Srimada's terminology. The soul is the divine presence which is potentially divine, but it has to grow. It's a sleeping soul. A soul is a sleeping psychic. Okay? A will and keen emotions. Emotions are keen in an animal. It can get angry, it can show affection, it can show friendship, it can show pain. So it can also show pleasure. Dogs, when they wag their tail, you know that they are very happy. When cats purr, you know that they are happy. So, yeah, that's right. Okay, so the latter also has a rudimentary, a kind of thought, soul, will, and keen emotions, even though less developed. Its psychology is yet the same in kind as man's. So, in other place also he says that there isn't basically too much of difference between the human being psychology and that of the animal. Basically the same. We also get angry, they also get angry. We also like things, they also like things. They are also, there is jealousy in them, man also has got jealousy in them. There is a great resemblance. The only difference is that man can become and intelligence, logical intelligence he can develop. Not that he does it all the time, he doesn't, but he can, whereas the animal can't normally. It's limited at that level. So, but all these capacities in the animal are automatically moved and restricted, and strictly limited, almost even constituted by the lower nervous being. Now we'll look at the sentence. But all these capacities in the animal are automatically moved and restricted. There is no thought. It's an automatic action, like a machine. The animal moves almost like a machine. It is universal nature which makes a tree grow, but it also makes the animals eat when they are hungry, sleep when they are tired. This is all an automatic machinery. Largely it is true of man also, but he has the capacity of logical intelligence, which the animal does not have. The animal can go up to 2 or 3 steps of logic, not more than that. It's surprising sometimes crows, they say, can go up to 5 steps. For instance, if they have to get fruit, which is in a glass jar, they know that they have to open the top. And how can you open the top? There's an instrument somewhere, so you go and get that instrument, and that instrument also is hidden somewhere. So you find out how to take that instrument, then you come here and then you open it. So it can do these several steps. 3 or 4 steps it can do, up to 5 steps. But man can use his logic for 7, 8, 9, 10 steps. So that the animal is limited. Okay. So that's what he's saying. Even though less developed, his psychology is yet the same in kind as man's. But all these capacities in the animal are automatically moved and restricted, strictly limited, almost even constituted by the lower nervous being. That means it's almost matter and life only. The mind does not come into the picture. Note the word lower nervous being. Nervous, life, vital. Being, body. So it is restricted only to the body vital level. Not much of mind action in it. Okay, almost simply saying. All animal perceptions, sensibilities, activities are ruled by nervous and vital instincts, cravings, needs, satisfactions, of which the nexus is the life impulse and vital desire. Life impulse, the vital, no? And life impulse. So hunger, sleeping, the propagation of this, the species.
Yes,
sex.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are all the mechanical things that nature imposes on the animal. It imposes them also on man, but man has got a will. He can use a will. The animal very rarely uses a will. It is the action takes place by nature itself. Nature is making it do. Just like it makes a tree grow. So, man too is bound, but less bound to this automatism of the vital nature. Man can bring an enlightened will. He can. That's the difference. An enlightened will, an enlightened thought, and enlightened emotions to the difficult work of his self-development. He has the capacity to develop himself in all these ways. He can more and more subject to these more conscious and reflecting guides the inferior function of desire. So, the English is that word subject is used as a verb.
Yes.
So you have to be very careful.
Yes.
He can more and more subject what? The inferior function of desire to the conscious and reflecting guides. Okay, that's what he means. Okay. In proportion as he can thus master and enlighten the lower self, he is man and no longer an animal. When he uses his mind more than the mechanical needs only, then he is a man. Okay, so.
But when we look at the progress of man from Cro-Magnon.
That's right.
We see the intelligence coming more and more,
Yes.
becoming more and more powerful.
Yes. Gradation.
Mm.
In proportion as he can thus master and enlighten his lower self, which is the lower self, the body, the vital, and the mind also. He is man and no longer an animal. When he can begin to replace desire altogether by a still greater enlightened thought and will and sight and will, in touch with the infinite, consciously subject to a diviner will than his own, linked to a more universal and transcendent knowledge, he has commenced the ascent towards a supermind. He is on his upward march towards the divine. When he enters the level 2 of the spiritual planes of consciousness, his journey to the supermind has started, not before that. That's what he's saying. The words are clear. Greater enlightened thought and sight and will. Spiritual sight and will. These things, when it comes in touch with the infinite. Normal man is not in touch with the infinite at all. He is in touch with the finite. So he very clearly means the spiritual planes of consciousness. When you go there, your journey, spiritual journey has started to the supermind, to the divine. He is using the word divine.
It only begins there.
Yes. The journey begins there. There is no spiritual life if you are identified with your body-mind life. You can be a sadhak, but not the spiritual life. It is then in the highest mind of thought and light and will, or it is in the inner heart of deepest feeling and emotion that we must first center our consciousness. In either of them, or if we are capable, in both together, and use that as our leverage to lift the nature wholly towards the divine. The concentration of an enlightened thought, will, and heart turned in unison towards one vast goal of our knowledge, one luminous and infinite source of our action, one imperishable object of our emotion is the starting point of the yoga. And the object of our seeking must be the very fount of the light which is growing in us, the very origin of the force which we are calling to move our members. Our one objective must be the divine himself, to whom, knowingly or unknowingly, something always aspires in our secret nature. There must be a large, many-sided, yet single concentration on the thought, on the idea, the perception, the vision, the awakening touch, the soul's realization of the one divine. There must be a flaming concentration of the heart on the seeking of the all and eternal, and when once we have found him, a deep plunging and immersion in the possession and ecstasy of the all beautiful. There must be a strong and immovable concentration of the will on the attainment and fulfillment of all that the divine is, and a free and plastic opening of it to all that he intends to manifest in us. This is the triple way of the yoga. So, what is the triple way? We'll have a look. Okay. So, it is then in the highest mind of thought. Now he is using words which is referring back to the higher mind. To the highest mind of thought and light and will. Or it is in the inner heart of deepest feeling and emotion that we must first center our consciousness. So, he says the spiritual life starts with two ways. Either you lift yourself to the higher mind, that means you lose your identification with body, mind, life, and you think that you are the self. That's the one way to start the spiritual life. Or the other is to go into yourself, the inner heart of deepest feeling and emotion. He has used so many words, but he means a psychic being. So, if you contact the psychic being, then your journey can start, the spiritual journey. Or if you go to the self also, it can start. Before that, you are a sadhak trying to get to the first step. Okay? That we must first center our consciousness. So either vertically up in the self by use of the mind and concentration, or through love and intimacy with the divine horizontally deep in the heart. These are the two. He has used the word grappling hooks. We must not forget. Yes. He has used the word grappling hooks. So you want to start your life through love or through knowledge.
Does the opening of the psychic being recede also?
Yes, it does. When it comes forward, it can last for a short time, it can last for months, it can last, but when it is permanently fixed, then you can say that you have psychicized your nature. Yes, because we are a mixture of purity and impurity. There are so many pure feelings in us, but there is also a lot of impurity. So long as the impurity is there, the psyche cannot remain in the front. It goes back and tells you to prepare yourself. So that's what Srivendra used to often do. People used to say, we want to come to the ashram, and he would say, tell me what you want to do and what are your experiences. Then he would tell them that you can come, or you prepare yourself more by purification in the outside world, and then I'll tell you when you can come. So the starting of the normal yogas is different. The starting of this integral yoga is again different. Depends on the guru. Many he called. Many were called. Kanai Ganguli was called. Rajangam was called. Purani was called. These people were all called. Champaklal was not called because he came and settled here forever. There was no need to call him. He came himself. Amal also came himself, but Amal kept going back to Bombay very, very frequently. Amritada he was in Pondicherry. So he was, as a young boy of 16, he was attracted to Sri Aurobindo and never left him. From the age of 16.
From the age of 16. Wow.
So, it is then in the highest mind of thought and light and will, or it is in the inner heart of deepest feeling and emotion that we must first center our consciousness. Center he is using as a verb. We have to keep our consciousness centered in the self or in the psychic being. Vertical and horizontal. In either of them, or if we are capable in both together, and use that as our leverage to lift the nature wholly towards the divine. If you can do both together, fine. But normally that's not easy to do. So either you do this or that. Many people used to ask Sri Aurobindo, should I concentrate in the mind or should I concentrate in the heart? So Sri Aurobindo is saying, whatever is easier for you to do, both are okay. And if you can do both, even better. Okay, so. And with that, you have to pull your lower nature towards the divine. Wholly towards the divine. The concentration of an enlightened thought, will and heart turned in unison towards one vast goal of our knowledge, one luminous and infinite source of our action, one imperishable object of our emotion is the starting point of the yoga. So, when you start the yoga, it has to be one-pointed. The concentration of an enlightened thought, will and heart. So, there has to be an enlightened thought, there has to be an enlightened will, and there has to be an enlightened heart. Turned in unison, all three together. The word unison is, actually, if you break up the word, it's very interesting. Son, sound. In French, son is sound. So when there's a harmony, they are all in unison, like your Om choir. Exactly. There's a harmony, all in unison.
Sing as one.
Yes, that's right. So in unison, all they have to be completely in harmony with each other. Your thought, your will, and your emotion turned in unison towards what? One vast goal of our knowledge. So the divine is our knowledge. He is also the luminous and infinite source of our action. He is also one imperishable object of our emotion. So it is a starting point. And this is the triple thing that he's talking about. So there has to be knowledge, there has to be emotion, and there has to be action. And all the three have to be turned towards the divine. So if you want to, alright, we'll come to the last sentence. And the object of our seeking must be the very fount of the light which is growing in us, the very origin of the force which we are calling to move our members. Our objective must be the divine himself, to whom, knowingly or unknowingly, something always aspires in our secret nature. So, he has told you that you have to do it three ways: knowledge, emotion, and action. So, he is using different words, but what he means is Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. All the three we have to do in the integral yoga. So, your thoughts must be turned to the divine, your emotions must be turned to the divine, all your actions also must be offered to the divine. Triple, that's the word he uses in the last sentence of the para. Okay, so he's saying that in everybody, whether you know it or not, there is a seeking. When the psychic being of the soul is there is a seeking for the divine. There must be a large, many-sided yet single concentration of the thought on the idea. Idea of what? The divine. The perception, the vision, the awakening touch, the soul's realization of the one divine. That is our, so we must be thinking of him, we must have all our emotions turned towards him, and all our actions also must have him as our aim. There must be a flaming concentration of the heart on the seeking of the all and eternal. And when once we have found him, a deep plunging and immersion in the possession and ecstasy of the all beautiful. There must be a strong and immovable concentration of the will on the attainment and fulfillment of all that the divine is, and a free and plastic opening to it, of it, to all that he intends to manifest in us. This is the triple way of the yoga. The triple way, very clear, he has described: Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. Use your thoughts, focus your thoughts on the divine, focus your emotions also on the divine, and all your actions also must be turned towards the divine. This is the triple way of the yoga. He should have added also integral yoga, but that's what he's discussing. All the three together, unison. But on that which as yet we know not, how shall we concentrate? And yet we cannot know the divine unless we have achieved this concentration of our being upon him. A concentration which culminates in a living realization and a constant sense of the presence of the one in ourselves and in all of which we are aware, is what we mean in yoga by knowledge and the effort after knowledge. It is not enough to devote ourselves by the reading of scriptures or by the stress of philosophic reasoning to an intellectual understanding of the divine. For At the end of our long mental labor, we might know all that has been said of the eternal, possess all that can be thought about the infinite, and yet we might not know Him at all. This intellectual preparation can indeed be a first stage in a powerful yoga, but it is not indispensable. It is not a step which all need or can be called upon to take. Yoga would be impossible except for a very few if the intellectual figure of knowledge arrived at by the speculative or meditative reason were its indispensable condition or a binding preliminary. All that the light from above asks of us that it may begin its work is a call from the soul and a sufficient point of support in the mind. This support can be reached through an insistent idea of the divine in the thought, a corresponding will in the dynamic parts, an aspiration, a faith, a need in the heart. Any one of these may lead or predominate if all cannot move in unison or in an equal rhythm. The idea may be and must in the beginning be inadequate. The aspiration may be narrow and imperfect. The faith poorly illumined or even as not surely founded on the rock of knowledge, fluctuating, uncertain, easily diminished. Often, even, it may be extinguished and need to be lit again with difficulty, like a torch in a windy pass. But if once there is a resolute self consecration from deep within, if there is an awakening to the soul's call, these inadequate things can be a sufficient instrument for the divine purpose. Therefore, the wise have always been unwilling to limit man's avenues to God. They would not shut against his entry even the narrowest portal, the lowest and darkest postern, the humblest wicket gate. Any name, any form, any symbol, any offering has been held to be sufficient if there is a consecration along with it. For the divine knows himself in the heart of the seeker and accepts the sacrifice. So, this is a very interesting para, and we'll have to look at it in detail. So, we can do that next time.
Very good.
So, we will redo this para. He's telling you very clearly that mental development is not an absolute necessity. If it is there, fine. But if you insist that mind must be developed before you can start your yoga, very few would be competent for that.
The intellectual preparation.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a preparation.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste all.